Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Your Views on the News with me, Azad Ali. Are disproportionate number of young men from the Horn of Africa being detained and questioned by British police without proper evidence? That is what some human rights activists are claiming. They say the British government is deliberately targeting these men and encouraging them to act as spies within their own communities. These incidents seem to be on the rise within the Somali community, and it appears that individuals who refuse to cooperate with the British intelligence services may face grave consequences. Often these men are labelled terror suspects, are not granted trials in court, and in the case of one man, Mahdi Hashi, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, revoked his British citizenship without explanation. Here's Fabian Martin with more.
There is growing concern that Somalian nationals are being disproportionately targeted by police in the UK. This summer, 23-year-old Mahdi Hashi, a youth worker from Camden, disappeared. His family later received a letter from the government announcing that his British citizenship had been revoked. Mr. Hashi's family claimed that he had been approached a number of times by MI5 to work for them to spy on his community, and his father spoke out to voice their opinions.
All I can say is that Mahdi is a Muslim in belief, and he's a practicing Muslim. But being a practicing Muslim is not being an Islamist. That's all why I can say. That's all why he's being victimized.
On refusing to do so, it is claimed that he was stopped and threatened by airport officials as he travelled to Somalia. Human rights organisation Cage Prisoners regard Hashi's as a clear case of profiling.
They were trying to offer him a job, saying that, effectively, you're an extremist. We know you're one. The only way out of this is for you to come and work for us, to come and help us. These are the kind of tactics that were being used. Because he's of Somali origin, this is a purely racist profiling policy of the British government and particularly its security agencies.
Having been missing for over 3 months, Mr. Hashi reappeared on the 21st of December in a federal court in New York City. He appeared alongside 2 other men of Somali descent. All were charged with material support and arms violations in conjunction with Al-Shabaab, an Islamic group deemed terrorist by the US. And this is not the first time that a Somali national has been held without trial, or indeed stopped by the authorities. Notably, even the British Olympic double gold medalist and Somali-born athlete Mo Farah was stopped and detained at the airport on his way to visit his family in America this Christmas. The growing number of such cases, including Farah's, who was recently awarded a CBE from the Queen, may well suggest that Somalis are increasingly being judged as legitimate targets by British anti-terrorist organisations. And most recently, the Somalian Ibrahim Magag has entered the headlines, who disappeared on Boxing Day whilst being held under a new monitoring regime called Terrorism Prevention Investigation Measures. His disappearance has sparked dispute between former Labour Minister Pat McFadden and Home Secretary Theresa May, who is blamed for watering down control orders and in doing so allowing Magag, labelled as an Al-Qaeda terror suspect, to become a threat to public safety. But the claims that many from the Horn of Africa are being questioned, detained, or indeed stripped of their British citizenship without trial raises questions as to the legitimacy of the government's approach in handling such cases, and whether they breach basic human rights that the British legal system prides itself on. Fabian Martin, Islam Channel.
Well, what do you think? Are Somalis and others from the Horn of Africa being unfairly labelled as terrorists? Or are the intelligence services simply doing what they need to do to prevent terrorist attacks? Call us with your views. You can also tweet us now. We have a hashtag, and the hashtag is YourViewsIC. That's the letter IC. Your views, one word, IC. So please do tweet us. Well, to discuss these issues with me in the studio are Duale Yusuf from the Somali Unity Council, Mohamed Ibrahim, Chair of the London Somali Youth Forum, Abukar Awale, presenter on Somali Channel, and also joining us on the phone is Dr. Julian Richards, co-founder of the Centre for Security and Intelligence Studies at the University of Buckingham. Assalamu alaikum and good evening to you all.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, if we can just take the first thing that strikes me anyway from that report is the case of Mahdi Hashi. And Mohamed Ibrahim, if I come to you on this, this is a young man who a few years back was stopped by the security services. There was a prominent newspaper story describing his ordeal where he refused to cooperate with the intelligence services. And what we must stress here, the cooperation they were seeking was that he acts as a spy within the Somali community. And it seems now that he's been rendered to America.
First of all, Islam Channel, thank you very much for giving this issue the focus that it deserves. As a chair of London Somali Youth Forum, I've been following this story for a few years now. It's not just Mahdi Hashi, there's another 9 brothers that are involved in this process who have been somehow threatened to work for MI5. Some of them have been stopped at airports, and once they're released, then they get a follow-up call saying whether they're willing to work for the agencies. If they refuse, then they're then harassed with phone calls and threats to work for. So this is a real evidence that's already been documented. And this has already appeared in the independent newspaper 2-3 years ago. Clearly, as a chair of London Somali Youth Forum, we understand and recognize that terrorism does exist, and Somalians are already losing their lives back home. So we don't deny that. But what is alarming to us is the tactics being used by the authorities to encourage these young people to work for them. Because what my main concern is, this issue or this process or tactics being used is alienating young moderate Muslims who are abiding law citizens. And we have as much stake in having a safe society in the UK as everyone. And I think at the moment there is this what I call a soft approach or draconian approach, I should say, in approaching young Somalis. And I think 9/11 was a game changer. And also the issue in Somalia at the moment is also a game changer. And the focus has now is on young Somalis.
Let me bring in Abukar. Now, Mohammed mentions there about tactics being used and the consequences of those tactics, which is it alienates young Somalis. But those tactics also have another consequence, which we kind of saw in the example of Mo Farah. For example, here is a Somali British citizen who won the 2 gold medals, who recently got awarded the CBE, goes to America and is picked out of a line. I mean, he had to show his gold medals to make them believe that who he was. So there is another impact, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, and I'm actually, it's funny, but I'm actually glad this has happened to Mo Farah, because for them to choose Mo Farah, to stop him because of his name, that clearly shows these people doesn't have a clue what they are doing. True. But yes, those actions have a huge impact on the community itself, because even if there was individuals who were concerned, people are not willing to come forward now to report crime, because they will say, look, if I even say I'm concerned with this issue, they will target me. And there is a very well-known saying within the Somali community now: if you come from abroad and you come to Heathrow Airport, it will say, in Somali's mind, it will say, in your right if you hold European or UK passport, in your left if you hold any other passport, and over here if you are a Somalian. So a lot of people have been stopped, and this policy is not working. It's segregating Somali communities, and it's not helpful.
And obviously, Duale, the tactics that are being used is known as Schedule 7. It is a police power that has a similar effect of Section 44, which the European Courts of Human Rights deemed unacceptable. But here we have another draconian power that is targeting, in this particular case, Somalis.
Yeah, because Somalia, as far as we know at the moment, is in a critical situation, because Somalia is a failed state at the moment. There's no central government to act in for the Somali citizens. And since 1991, Somalia had so many difficulties, not only to be oppressed by the younger Somalians, but back home, if you look Somalia back home, the youngest is 70% of the Somali youngsters have no work or job. And many of them has been labeled as the security service, labeling here as Somalia as a terrorist organization. Those youngsters has been labeled all the youngsters Al-Shabaab and has been detained some part of Mogadishu and other parts. And unless we come out of this, Somalian, we complain all the time. We're saying people are doing this and that to our children or to ourselves. But how the Somalians themselves why they shouldn't change for themselves? Why they blame all the time other people? Why the Somalian cannot change their lives, their country? Well, they shouldn't, what's the cause? Why African Union are becoming the servant and the voice of Somalians? We're the Somali government, we're the Somali intellectuals. We all the time mourning. Yeah. But if we look ourselves as the Somalians, I think we're wrong.
Well, before you do, what I want to do is bring Dr. Julian Richards into the discussion. Good evening, Dr. Julian. Can you hear us?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. We were just going through the example of Mahdi Hashi and then expanding on the specific power that the police are using, which is Schedule 7. Now, a lot of Muslims do feel that this power, and it's not just particularly Somali community, but a lot of Muslims do feel that this power is pinpointed at them and picking on them in ports and airports.
Yes, indeed. And I think I would draw an important distinction between the power itself and the need for it. And I do believe that there is a need to have a facility like this in the arsenal. I mean, every country needs to protect itself from serious security threats. And as we heard earlier, it is a fact that the particular condition of Somalia at the moment, the insurgency that's going on, and the fact that a number of individuals are travelling over there to take part in the militancy and insurgency, some of whom reports suggest that quite considerable numbers are travelling on British passports. That is something that we have to deal with in some way. And I know that the Schedule 7 powers that you referred to are very controversial and in some ways very similar to the Section 44 powers that Britain was censured about by the European community. However, I think that there needs to be some way of border authorities being able to speak to or pick out certain people.
Well, it should be perhaps intelligence-led.
Yes.
But the problem, which I don't know if you heard Mohamed Ibrahim mention at the outset, is how it's being used, how these tactics are being played out. For example, being stopped and being asked a question because you've got some intelligence, that's fine, everyone would understand.
Sure.
But then to kind of put people under pressure to work for you or to spy for you or to do things that they don't feel comfortable with. This is where the backlash is really taking place.
Absolutely, and that's I was coming on to say that there's a difference between the power itself and the facility to be able to do this and the way that it's implemented, and that's the key thing. And a lot of it does fall down on the sort of training and capability of border officials. And clearly there's no doubt that certain people are being picked out willy-nilly. I mean, the Mo Farah case is an example of that, an almost ridiculous example of how somebody who just happens to have a Somali name is picked out of the line. Now, clearly that's wrong and raises all sorts of humanitarian issues and sort of civil rights issues. So I think, but the key here is not to say that we should abolish the facility and the power altogether. I think it's much more important to make sure that we apply this in a very intelligence-led way, and that the training and capability and awareness of board officials is improved and brought up to the level that we would want it to be.
Okay. Duale?
Yeah, I want to say, Dr. Julian has mentioned young Somalians are traveling to Somalia. Yes, we all need to go back and visit our people. We can't disconnect our community back home, our families. And, you know, Somalia, he didn't mention it, you know, Somalia is under occupation. We didn't call the African Union other Ethiopians who hold in the Somali territories and the Kenyans who now taking fast of the land of Somalian. And cause of displaced, he doesn't mention that. The Ethiopian invaded in 2006 in Somalia, while Somalia has created themselves peace for the first time after 16 years of civil war, while the world hand, you know, turn out their side. But now, if I'm traveling myself, I've been detained, I've been labeled because he's going to Shabab. Because it's not Shabab, doesn't belong to Somalians. Somalia, this country, I think the world has taken a wrong perception for Somalians. We have rights to defend our country if anybody, you know, attacked our country. Because nobody cares, Somalians. There are 650,000 refugees in Mogadishu today. Right now I'm talking to you. Majority are young children and women. And who cares about? There are 550,000 in Dadaab, the biggest economy in the world. Who cares? What we're hearing, all the Somali aid goes in the Kenyans and Ethiopians and the few Somali leaders. But the majority are Somali are suffering.
Well,
also here.
Let me ask Julian.
Can I just come in quickly, briefly?
Yeah.
I understand Duale's point of view on the whole issue of Somalia. But I have to say, and I have to be fair to those individuals who've been working very hard against all odds to build something positive for Somalia. Somalia is making significant improvement. There is a legitimate government. There is a lot of diaspora now who are going back to rebuild the country. There is a lot of development going on. So there is a hope, my brother. Don't be so negative.
Well, no, I don't think it was being negative. I think the point, and if I can ask Julian, if you can respond to this, the point here is about how you would deem someone to be suspicious and what basis you would use and how that isn't consistent across the board, if you like. So, you know, during the Arab Spring in Libya, there were many Libyans that were going over. Were Libyans being picked up in the same way? We know now some Syrians are being picked up. It seems, you know, pick and choose. There doesn't seem to be clarity in the legislation on what's allowed and what's not allowed, if you like.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the uncomfortable facts here is that it's very, very difficult to get good intelligence on who the key individuals are. Now, clearly, as one of the speakers said earlier, just the fact of travelling to Somalia isn't good enough, or shouldn't be. You know, people go back and forth to visit family and do all sorts of things. The key is, and it is a fact, it's an unfortunate fact, that hidden amongst that flow of people going back and forth, there will be a small number, a very small number of individuals who will pose a security threat. So the key is, how do you get intelligence on who those individuals are, and how do you mitigate that threat in time? And that is actually an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, particularly in a somewhat chaotic situation. I think we can describe the situation in Somalia as that.
That's true of Somalia, but why do we have laws? And a lot of people do perceive that we have laws that are so draconian. You know, if you look at even the new suggestion of having secret courts where secret evidence is being held, why is it that we're resorting? We're a bastion of freedom of expression, freedom of justice, democracy, and here we are actually bringing in more and more dictator-like laws.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't agree with all of the proposals that have been put forward for laws, and I would agree that some of them perhaps go over the line. However, it is a case, it's an unfortunate case, that the UK does face some serious terrorist threats, and some of these have been realised in the past. And we have a duty to protect ourselves. We pay taxes and we expect security in the UK. We expect our intelligence agencies to be able to uncover who the people of concern are. So there's a very delicate balance to be struck. You know, there is a need for security measures and security laws, I'm afraid, in my view. Some of those may step over the line. Some of them may be fine in principle, but the question is how and when they're implemented, which is probably...
Okay. Well, let me allow Mohamed to come in there.
Having been monitoring the issue for a long time, since 9/11, there's a perception grown at the moment on the right-wing media, on new laws, and also some of us are being called benefit cheese and benefit scroungers. So there is a tendency at the moment to say Somalians are now an open game, and at the moment that's demoralizing a lot of young Muslims, young Somalians, and when they hear their main role model, Mohamed Farah, has been stopped just because his name is Mohammed, that's even more demoralizing, and it shows young people that there is a degree of discrimination being applied here and racial profiling, and that defeats the objective of having a safe, tolerant and contributing society. And
but the point that Julian was making is that there is a security risk which you said exists. So how do the security services or the police go about their business?
I mean, I reckon from a policy point of view, I mean, I'm a project officer within the civil service at the moment, so I know there can be difficulty in mitigating these risks. It is a very difficult process to manage, but you mentioned it earlier, it has to be intelligence-led. One person cannot be caught because his name is Mohammed. Do you understand what? Yeah. So the issue is at the moment, the issue is not intelligence-led, it's not consistent, and it's too draconian. I mean, we've got an issue at the moment where we lecture around the world about human rights and freedom of speech, and at the same time, we've got a young person who's arrested who doesn't know the evidence or what the police have on him. And for this to happen in the UK in the 21st century is actually appalling and unacceptable. And just because it's happening to a minority of Muslims and Somalians, the media turn the blind eye. And so what we're saying is there isn't a balanced discussion here. There is the perception of government and interest groups that's being pursued at the moment. And at the moment, we've got the Islam Channel and a few other organizations that are working with us and helping us get this issue out on the open, but there is a lot of silence and people are struggling at the moment.
Okay, just before you do, let me read out a tweet that's come in. For Mo Farah to be detained as terrorists in the US shows how clueless they are and how they just judge people from by their name, which is exactly what you were saying.
And also, it's actually it defeats the objective. And I think if there's policymakers watching this program, they should review their processes. They should retrain their staff. And this issue also demonstrates it's got an international dimension to it, which means that at the moment we become a fair game, and that can only disrupt and also damage community relations in the long term.
Okay.
There's one thing I want to add.
I'm going to let all of you add things, but we're coming up to a break. So let's take a break. Inshallah, after the break, we'll carry on the discussion. And we do want to hear your views, callers. So after the break, please do give us a call and tell us what you think. Is it just Somalis or is it just Muslims? Security services, are they doing the right things or not? And remember, we want to hear your tweets or want to read your tweets as well. Your views, I see. See you after the break.